The story of Nintendo Switch 2 is not just about a console. It is a story about patience, timing, and the strange balance between excitement and frustration. Fans waited for years, watching leak after leak, hearing rumor after rumor, and hoping every event would finally bring the official reveal. Yet, Nintendo held back. And now, thanks to a recent Bloomberg report, we finally have a clearer picture of why. Nintendo delayed the Switch 2 not because of hardware problems, not because of supply issues, but because of games. Yes, games. According to the report, the company wanted to make sure that the big launch titles were polished to perfection before the console ever hit the shelves. This might sound obvious at first. After all, who doesn't want good games? But in today's industry, this decision is far from normal. Many companies push out unfinished products and rely on updates later. Nintendo, however, took the longer road. They decided to frustrate fans, risk leaks, and even test the patience of third-party developers, all for the sake of quality. This is the first major point we need to understand about Switch 2. Nintendo does not operate like other gaming giants. Where some publishers rush out titles half-baked and fix them with patches, Nintendo refuses to play that game. They would rather make the world wait than deliver something broken. The result? The Switch 2 launched later than almost anyone expected. Think back for a moment. At one point, insiders were confident the Switch 2 would launch in late 2023 or early 2024. People were so sure that even leaked details about Pokémon Scarlet and Violet updates mentioned a new Switch version of the game. That didn't happen. Instead, fans had to wait until April 2025 for the official reveal, and 2 more months for the debut. That's nearly a year later than many expected. And yet, when it finally arrived, the launch lineup was strong, the performance was solid, and the console instantly became a success. Nintendo's choice here speaks to a deeper trend in gaming. Development times are longer. Games are bigger. Visuals are sharper. A single release can now take 6, 7, or even 10 years to make. And Nintendo is no exception. For example, Breath of the Wild launched at the start of the Switch generation, and Tears of the Kingdom arrived at the very end, nearly 7 years later. That's 2 Zelda games for an entire console cycle. Compare that to the older days, when Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask came only 2 years apart. Or Wind Waker and Twilight Princess arriving within the same generation. The industry has changed. Nintendo knows this. And their approach with the Switch 2 shows they are adjusting. The Bloomberg report claimed developers at Nintendo specifically asked for more time. They didn't want to rush the new Mario and Donkey Kong games. They didn't want to drop a half-finished Metroid Prime 4. And the company listened. They delayed the console, even though it meant holding back hardware that was already ready for production. That is the kind of decision most businesses would never make. But for Nintendo, perfection has always mattered more than speed. Now, what did this delay mean for fans? On one hand, it meant waiting. And waiting. And waiting some more. It meant endless speculation, countless leaks, and so many fake Switch 2 reveal rumors that people stopped believing them. At one point, it seemed like the console might never come. But when it finally launched, something important happened. Because Nintendo had waited, they could ship not just the console but also a lineup of polished, high-quality games alongside it. Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and upgraded versions of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, these weren't rushed ports or placeholders. They were strong, full releases that made the Switch 2 launch feel worth the wait. And let's not forget the bigger picture. By waiting, Nintendo also managed to stockpile units. They had enough consoles ready at launch to meet demand in a way we don't usually see. The Switch 2 didn't stumble out of the gate. It raced forward, breaking records even outside of the holiday season. In fact, despite launching in mid-year, it became the fastest-selling gaming hardware in history. That's not a coincidence. That is the result of careful planning. But while we're on the subject of waiting, we also need to look at the state of modern game development. Creating massive open worlds, complex mechanics, and stunning visuals takes more time than ever before. Developers like Masahiro Sakurai have openly spoken about this challenge. He explained how each new generation of games takes longer, costs more, and pushes teams harder. Nintendo knows this reality. That's why they are adjusting their release cycle. Instead of flooding the market with multiple Zeldas or Marios per generation, they may now stick to just one big release for each. It's slower, yes. But the trade-off is depth and polish. Of course, while Nintendo was taking its time, something else exploded onto the scene, an indie game called Hollow Knight, Silksong. This game didn't just launch. It broke the internet. On release day, every major storefront, from Steam to Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo's own eShop, crashed under the demand. Servers couldn't keep up. Fans had waited years for Silksong, and when it finally appeared, the rush was overwhelming. Think about that for a second. A game developed by a tiny team, just 3 people at its core, managed to shake the entire industry. Within hours, Silksong peaked at over 500,000 players on Steam. Add in sales across other platforms, and it likely hit 1 million units in its first weekend. That is unheard of for an indie game. It's a sign of how much hype had built up over 8 years of development. And it shows that in today's world, even small studios can create tidal waves of excitement. On Switch 2, Silksong shines even brighter. It supports 120 frames per second in docked mode, dropping only slightly in resolution. In handheld, it still pushes smooth gameplay at high frame rates. And the best part? Team Cherry offered a free upgrade. Buy it on Switch 1, and you get the Switch 2 version for free. No extra cost. That kind of consumer-friendly approach earned them huge respect. Silksong's success also highlights a sharp contrast with Nintendo's strategy. Nintendo delayed its console for years, carefully preparing every detail. Team Cherry, on the other hand, kept fans in suspense for almost a decade, but when the game finally launched, it didn't just arrive, it exploded. The lesson here is that patience can pay off in different ways. For Nintendo, patience meant polish and a strong launch lineup. For Team Cherry, patience meant building hype so massive that the entire gaming world stopped to take notice. Now, let's circle back to Nintendo. Alongside Silksong's chaos, Nintendo quietly rolled out updates to its Game Boy Advance emulator app for Switch and Switch 2. These updates weren't flashy, but they mattered. They added custom button mapping for each game, higher resolution in handheld mode, and even a fun Easter egg with the classic startup sequence. These little touches show that Nintendo hasn't forgotten its roots. They continue to respect their history while pushing into the future. But not everything is perfect. We also learned that the new James Bond game, 007, First Light, will use game key cards on Switch 2 instead of full cartridges. This is a reminder of the challenges developers face with storage size and costs. Some games are simply too big for Nintendo's physical media. It's frustrating, but it's the reality of modern gaming. Finally, one of the most important comparisons came with Star Wars Outlaws. Seeing this game run on Switch 2 alongside the Xbox Series S was eye-opening. Many had wondered whether the Switch 2 could keep up with modern consoles. And while the Series S still has some advantages, the Switch 2 proved it can deliver strong, optimized ports. In some cases, the Switch 2 version even looked better, with sharper lighting and smoother environments. Yes, there were issues with texture pop-in, but overall, the performance was impressive. This shows that if developers take the time to optimize, the Switch 2 can absolutely compete. So where does this leave us at the end of Section 1? It leaves us with a deeper understanding of Nintendo's philosophy. The Switch 2 could have arrived earlier, but Nintendo chose patience. They valued perfection over speed. That decision tested the patience of fans and publishers, but it also gave us a console that launched strong, with polished games and record-breaking sales. At the same time, indie developers like Team Cherry reminded us that even small teams can shake the industry when passion meets patience. The gaming world is changing. Development takes longer. Expectations are higher. And patience, whether from a giant like Nintendo or a small team like Team Cherry, has become the most powerful weapon in the industry.